on stage, by order, is Honorable Moses Kiari Korea, Cabinet Secretary for Investment, Trade and Industry in Kenya. Please welcome him. Second is His Excellency Sultan bin Rashid Al Khater, Undersecretary at Qatar's Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Welcome. Third is Dr. Oziel Ndagijimana, Minister of Finance and Economic Planning at the Republic of Rwanda. And last but not least is Jay Shroff, who is the Group CEO at UPL Limited. Thank you and welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. In this conversation, we're going to be delving a little bit deeper into trade between Gulf and African countries. So we have representatives from both sides, and I'm going to get right into it and start by asking the questions. I hope they're questions you guys are happy to answer. So I'll start with you, Your Excellency. How do you think are the shifting geopolitical interests impacting trade today?
Well, I think Africa particularly is on a wake-up call because three factors have combined to get us out of our slumber. Let us begin with the pandemic and what we went through there in terms of, first of all, the issue of vaccine, the vaccine nationalism. And it was difficult. You know, Africa was the last continent to get the vaccines. Yeah. As a result of that, we've woken up to that challenge. And now, you know, for example, in Kenya, we've signed up a big deal with Moderna to set up the first vaccine factory in sub-Saharan Africa. You know, something which could not have happened before the pandemic. And then a big upsurge, especially on digital trade and e-commerce because of the realities of COVID. And then, of course, the war in Ukraine and the food crisis that it has, you know, caused. And so many African countries waking up to the realities of food security, of food sustainability, of food self-reliance. Again, something that has gotten us out of the comfort zone that was there before. And then finally, on the issue of the trade tensions between China especially and the United States. And I think one of the panelists who was here before has talked about the big shift of Chinese companies into other places. And I must say that Africa, and particularly Kenya, we are enjoying unfortunately, this development because a lot of Chinese companies now moving into Africa and specifically to Kenya to take advantage of, the sort of preferential regime that exists between Kenya and other sub-Saharan countries and Africa and the EU and the UK and the GCC. Yeah. So all this is creating new realities that were not there before in terms of the trade relationships.
Yeah. Your Excellency, Sultan, how do you think are geopolitics affecting trade today, and what are the main challenges you're seeing from your position?
Well, thank you, Abir. First of all, thank you for having me with the dear panelists here, and I'm happy to see that and to welcome as well all really the visitors to Qatar at the Economic Forum here. Well, geopolitics and the shifts that's happening around us, is really one of our day-to-day stories. And it's an everyday dilemma. We think that really countries have the wisdom really to look at these geopolitics interests and the shifts in it that bring really opportunities with them. We have learned a lot as well from these crises and turmoils, and we came stronger. Let me maybe reflect back on especially the specifics around Africa and Qatar and also maybe the GCC. We look at our also strong ties that we have with Africa, and those are affected really by the historical really grounds that we share together, that is stemming from cultural, geographical, demographics, and really there are embedded capabilities and strengths within these two regions. And we see combining those really knowledge, combining those capabilities can really bridge over and meet those challenges and geopolitics shifts. Qatar has learned a lot through several shocks in the past, including compounded really crises that we have seen over the past decade. But we have moved on, and being stronger and capable, we built resilience. We met really our targets towards achieving our national vision. We see that the GCC and Africa, they are rich in what they have from natural resources that they are really gifted with. They are also rich in the human capital and the capacity that is available. The only thing is that we need to look at the opportunities where we can create economic rivers. We need those corridors. We need really to build the hope, and we have the will, we have the endurance that we all share together. When I looked at some of the numbers, they are not really reflecting that in our really trade today. GCC have country, and especially Qatar, they have really expertise in the transformation projects where they can really deliver. And Africa, they have a lot of really kind of wealth in their natural resources. The reserves they have, especially in oil, gas, minerals, in the agriculture, in the water as well resources. We have desert on the other side here in the GCC, but we have transformed our really reserves, especially in oil and gas, to help developing other sectors. So we think that really this is how we need to overcome by overcome the geopolitics shifts or other shocks, to the global trade by creating economic rivers and corridors of cooperation.
Yeah. Minister, from your perspective and from Rwanda's perspective, what do you think are the main challenges to trade today?
Thank you. Geopolitical tensions, especially the war in Ukraine, have disrupted the global supply chain for many commodities, including energy, fertilizers, and food. This has resulted in global inflation almost everywhere. But for us in Africa, it's been a good lesson because we've been dependent on import of goods that we can produce locally, especially food, because Africa has about 60% of unused arable land. So there's a great potential for food production, for our national food security, but also for export. So also COVID-19 also have revealed similar weaknesses. Currently, we in Africa, many countries really are taking measures to produce themselves or in the region essential goods, medical products, food, and others. So, as my colleague said, there is a great potential for domestic production in Africa, for intra-African trade, but also for export to the Gulf and to the rest of the world.
Yeah. Jay, you bring a unique perspective because you're the only non-government perspective on this panel. So what would you say to your industry is the biggest challenge? Is it geopolitics? Is it economical volatility? What would you say is the biggest trade obstacle right now?
Thank you. I'm just recovering from a bad throat, so
Yeah.
excuse my voice. No, UPL one of the largest agriculture, chemicals and seeds player in the world. We operate in 138 countries, delivering products on time for farmers to plant the seed, to grow their crop, to harvest their crop, and then to store their grain. And almost every farmer in the world at least buys one product from us. So you can imagine the complexity during the last 4 years of huge disruptions, whether it was the shipping crisis, COVID, or the post-COVID crisis. And managing all those supply chains with 45 manufacturing locations around the world. We try very hard to make sure that we meet the expectations. There is not only that volatility, but there is currency issues. There is volatility on currencies. There's exchange control in different countries at different periods of time. The food security today is a huge number one issue for most countries in the world. Everywhere I travel, any governments you talk about, food security is either number one or number two issue. And this was not the case 5 years ago. I think the whole world took food for granted and that you could get food everywhere in time. I think the Ukraine crisis and the COVID crisis have brought this localization of food production as number one priority, and it is the number one issue. So for companies like us who are really behind the scene, making sure a farmer can produce the maximum yield, it's a huge logistics challenge. We've been doing it for 50 years, so it's part of our DNA to understand what happens when a country like Argentina has a problem on currency, or some countries in Africa have different kinds of challenges. The biggest challenge today, which is on top of this, which is going to get worse, is climate change. And climate change is also disrupting how we plan for our supply chain, because this is an El Nino year. Countries which have been getting a lot of rain are going to get less rain, and we have to start anticipating all these changes. So it's not going to get easier. I think the world is, with the decoupling happening, China plus one strategy. Companies like us who are committed to deliver products to our customers without any supply chain disruption have huge investments. So we would invest at least $500 million a year just to make sure that we have redundancy in case of all these political disruptions. Yeah. Very easy for politicians to create all these barriers, but for people who have to supply and deliver, we have to anticipate these things, and it's a big challenge. But that's the way of the world. I think it's not going to get easier. We just have to prepare better and invest more.
Yeah, and Minister, Your Excellency, from Qatar's perspective, I want to know what strategies and what incentives the government is offering to better trade relations in general, and in Qatar's case, what is Qatar doing to enhance trade?
Yeah. In this respect, Qatar also, as a member state within the GCC, they really operate in a way that to really enhance and advance the global trade. We're looking at also a unified market within GCC, and we developed several economic agreements with different countries and economic blocs worldwide in order really to create a hub, between those markets and also to utilize the strengths that we do have, since we do have really access to capital here and financing in this region. And also we have the expertise, to deliver to other nations with respect to our deliverability of really large-scale projects and transformational projects. The economic agreements and FTAs we did with several countries in order really to boost that kind of trade mechanisms. I know that economic shocks, they do slowdowns and disruptions, to some of really the key metrics of those trade really targets. But however, the dialogue is so important, and we have seen now countries, they adopt strategic dialogues with several really leaders of the global economy. And we do also embed within our mechanisms, whether on a national strategy or GCC, from GCC objectives, we adopt really some approaches of incentives that we can really attract foreign direct investments. We do also offer some opportunities of partnerships, especially in the public and private partnership goals. We invite companies to participate in several development projects in Qatar and in GCC. And we do also look at really how to also contribute to other nations' development agenda. Our focus as well is now into Africa, since we knew that both GCC and Africa have something in common, which is it's the aim of a global trade. Everybody is looking at those really regions as rich in their resources, and whether they want to do really financing or search for capital or for natural resources. So we have really now really some kind of negotiating position to offer leading economies as well, who are kind of ready for mass production or delivering whatever is possible to enhance GDPs worldwide for those countries. But our aim would be looked at as well, whatever is essential to help really nations and people directly, solving their problems, providing their essential needs. We would love to really see this put as our priority. And these are also serving the SDGs and serving the other international goals that all really countries are member of those international bodies.
Okay, Minister Moses, what do you think are the best strategies to support trade, and what do you think should Kenya or other governments do to support trade, bilateral trade?
I think the first thing that I would see is, first of all, building on the people-to-people relationship. That is the biggest impediment between trade between Africa and Kenya in that case, and the rest of the world. But the minute we get to understand each other from a people-to-people perspective, then it's going to be much easier to trade. That process of people-to-people relationship is going to be cut short by the technology and e-commerce and digital trade. Once we enable our peoples to be able to trade online, then even the sort of ignorance that comes in between people and knowing each other is going to be overcome. The biggest impediment also we're having is on the issues of logistics. And as my brother here has said, for example, there's no reason why the GCC is not trading with Africa. If I leave Doha to Nairobi, I will get to Nairobi much faster than somebody who is leaving LA to go to Washington, D.C., which is one country. So essentially we are one people. And you're going to see much more movement on this, especially on south to south. If somebody is leaving East Africa to go to Indonesia, for example, today it takes 24 hours because of the way they have to connect flights. But if there were a direct flight would take only 6 hours. And the shipping time is even much shorter. So the minute we get over on these people-to-people issues, we get over on the logistics, we embrace technology more, and then we start to see how can we be able to add to each other. Of course, the green conversation is also paramount to that. I am sitting next to my brother here, and we sit on extremely, different sides of the equation in terms of energy. Today, Kenya, our energy is 92% clean. And 92%, of course, on the other side is the other side of energy. So you find this sort of complementarity in terms of, the race towards net zero. Will also, work to accelerate between the relationship between Africa and GCC, for example, and as indeed in other countries. Of course, we are also, as Kenya, signing several trade agreements. We are in advanced stages of concluding a strategic trade and investment partnership with the US, the first one in Africa, about to conclude an EPA with the EU, about to conclude a comprehensive economic partnership agreement with the UAE. So, these sort of agreements and building blocks that we are building also on technology. Let me just mention something about technology. Africa is now home to 1.3 billion people. By the year 2050, 1 out of every 4 humans is going to be in Africa. And I always say is that going forward to the future, there is only going to be 2 categories of businesses. Businesses that are in Africa and businesses that are extinct, because Africa is the only remaining frontier for growth. So if you take for Kenya, for example, we've got a pioneering role in terms of mobile money, which is fueling e-commerce. M-Pesa, which is world acclaimed, mobile money service, and I would think the first one. $1 billion worth of transactions pass through M-Pesa every day. 5 million businesses are powered by M-Pesa, with 81 million transactions every day. So this sort of foundation makes it easier for us to take the leading role in technology, which again is also going to open a new frontier in terms of trade.
And Your Excellency, briefly on Rwanda's strategies to enhance trade, not necessarily with the Gulf, but to enhance and support trade relations. What is happening there?
Thank you. Number one, Rwanda has created a competitive business environment. We are now the best place to do business in Africa, and this has attracted the international investment from different countries, like Volkswagen from Germany, BioNTech in vaccine manufacturing, which is starting this year. Machines are already in place in Kigali. And also we have developed a mechanism to attract innovations. So we have a destination for different innovative technologies. We are also aware of the challenge of access to finance for investors, for local investors. So we have created a fund to support a new investment in the selected sectors, including in the agriculture value chains, in the manufacturing, and we have special incentives for exports. We have an export growth facility which supports companies to explore market outside Rwanda, and we are working hard to take advantage of the new African continent of free trade area. With regard to trade between Africa, Rwanda, and Africa in general, with the Gulf region, there is really potential to grow the existing bilateral trade, and all the factors of production are there. There is enough capital in the Gulf, in Qatar and the other countries here. And in Africa, especially in the area of agriculture, we have land, we have labor. So put together these capacities, we can really promote production, and we can increase the volume of trade between the two regions.
Jay, I'm keen to know from your perspective, how do you think governments can support industry players on tackling supply chain issues, especially when it comes to agriculture? I mean, we've heard from government perspectives, but I would be keen to hear from someone in the industry. What do you think governments are doing good, and what you think, what things you think can be done better to support industries?
Yeah. So I think, just stepping back, I mean, food security is such a big issue today for everybody. And localizing food is also a key part of that. And I believe that the biggest challenge in Africa is farmer resilience. And if you do not have a farmer who can make sure he can have some money saved to educate his children, to build his house, or to take medical care of himself, he's not resilient. If he's not resilient, the farmer is not bankable, right? So if you go to any bank around the world, at least with smallholder farmers, if you ask them to lend them, they run. They don't want to go anywhere near that. The risk is too high. The farmers cannot meet his own financial needs. So what is happening to the world? That you're eating every day, 3 times a day at least, and the supplier of your food is the poorest person in the supply chain. He has no money left at the end of the cycle to save, to reinvest. This is a very, it's ironic that this strata of, 80% of the world's food is produced by smallholder farmers. And these are the poorest people in the world. So there is a contradiction. So I think from my point of view, we as the industry or as the government or as have to build a system where farmers become more resilient. If farmers become resilient, you will automatically have innovation, financial inclusion, because one of the biggest issues is if you do not have any finance available for agriculture, for the farmers, if they cannot borrow money and are part of the system, you can never have food security, because these guys will produce just enough for themselves and maybe sell a little bit, and that cycle goes on and on. So I believe policies around financial inclusion of the agriculture food system, it has to go right from the procurement side to the understanding the challenges. Climate change is only going to make that worse. So what challenges you have today is just a preview of what you're going to have tomorrow. And I believe that if it is not talking about food security, which is going to solve the problem. It's talking about creating resilient food system, resilient farmer who is right in the middle. I mean, we are a key input supplier. So for us, we understand what happens when there's a drought. He has no money. He's finished. And he starts again, all over again. So all I would like to say is that we should focus on the whole supply chain for food security, identify the weak links, like making a resilient farmer, and that will have financial inclusions, because the financial sector will innovate, like M-Pesa, so many other innovations for small farmer lending, and that will drive the food security of the world.
So you're joined today by 3 government officials. If you were to put, an item on an action course, one item to better food security and enhance food systems, what would it be? Just one item course.
Sure. No, I think focusing on farmer resilience would be number one. That would drive huge investment in agriculture, which is needed.
Okay. Minister, briefly, what do you think are trade opportunities that can exist between Africa and the Gulf? What do you think, if you were to, top item in your head, what do you think would it be the top item that could constitute opportunities between Gulf and African nations, including Kenya?
Top of my mind is food, because Africa still have a lot of potential for food and agriculture, and Kenya in that case, the GCC mostly imports all the food, and I see a big scope for collaboration between the GCC and Africa, particularly in the area of financial services to service this very huge market. I see a lot of potential for collaboration. Kenya is working with Qatar on the development of the Nairobi International Financial Center, so that the next big financial services institution is not managing Africa from Dubai or London or other places. And this is one very interesting conversation and discussion that is happening now between Kenya and Qatar. And also in the area of logistics, and Qatar Airways, for example, has been, and Emirates as well, has been extremely successful in terms of helping us in terms of logistics with the rest of the world. Now the big opportunity even exists with the interconnectivity of logistics within Africa itself. It is not uncommon to find that for you to move from one corner of Africa to another corner, you have to go to Europe, and then from Europe or Dubai, and then get back to Africa. And I see a big scope for cooperation in that particular area.
Your Excellency, top item in your head that could constitute trade between Africa and the Gulf?
I think the exchange of really strengths and really those capabilities that are rich within Africa, especially in natural resources, especially in minerals, and also the expertise and the access to agriculture, versus what we have here as well with respect to access to finance from our region. We have really a capital to invest in those aspects, and also looking at what we have done as well from being knowledgeable in delivering mega and large-scale projects. In Qatar, we have built really world-class infrastructure and facilities from what my colleagues mentioned earlier, airports, seaports, that have really access to the whole world. That makes really Qatar specifically within GCC region as a center between several continents, north to south and east to west. And really we are positioned to serve the purpose of strengthening these really relations with Africa and really creating more corridors, and I can reuse that name, economic rivers. We need to flow those rivers between really Qatar and Africa and the regions.
Yeah. Minister, final word with you.
Thank you. I want to add one word to what Mr. just said about the resilience of farmers. Climate risk is a serious issue, and whatever we do, we need to take into consideration that risk. So in Rwanda is taking serious measures for climate mitigation and adaptation, and we are mainstreaming climate risk in all our developmental activities. And recently, Rwanda was among a few countries that accessed the new Resilience and Sustainability Trust Fund of the IMF to support our climate action. So it's really something we need to keep as a top priority. With regard to trade between Africa and the Gulf, there are many opportunities, as I said. Currently, we are partnering with Qatar in logistics, in air transport, both aviation and airport. We want to create a big capacity for passenger transport, but also for cargo to serve Africa and to connect Africa to the world. There is a potential in mineral processing, precious metals and others, and all critical metals that really are used in the electronics industry. In agriculture, we are investing in irrigation systems to grow production, but also to mitigate the drought effect. So, but we want to add value to whatever we have. We want to move from export raw materials to processed goods. So in the countries in the Gulf, with the financial capacity, we can partner to really to improve on our production and the trade.
All right. Well, good luck on all your endeavors. And thank you for joining us today. And thank you for everyone for joining us this morning. Please give a hand for the panelists one more time. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby.